Hello, and welcome to Automating GDPR Privacy Requests with Office 365, utilizing the Privacy Central privacy platform. My name is Chris Gibbons. I'm the CEO of Privacy Central, and what I'm going to do is show you how to automate a privacy request from a data subject all the way through to actually completing that request in an automated fashion. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to start off on the portal that faces end users. So in this case, I have already logged in. First thing we need to do is actually go search for an application. And we're going to see here we have a few applications installed into this particular tenant. And one of them, we got a couple here, Office 365. One's a test one, another one's a regular one. If this was a much larger tenant, then we'd want to go and search for the particular application that we're looking for. That would narrow it down to help us find them. So we'll go ahead and do the production Office 365 instance that I have here. What's going to happen, it's going to load up this particular application. The application itself could support a lot of different things. Right now we're seeing how it's been configured in this tenant. Office 365 could support a delete, it could support a hold, it could support an update. That definition of what it means to do that would be defined in the application stub layer. In this particular case, we're only showing the consent in the query. That is configured at both the app level as well as at the tenant level, or even the system, the instance level. We also show what this particular thing supports in terms of the way it wants to search data. So over in my profile, take a quick look, is my profile has the ability to have different data types in it. In this case, the system itself has only been enabled to do emails, addresses, phone numbers. We could make it go past that to be able to do social security numbers, driver's license, and passports, as well as move into biometrics and DNA. At this point, these are the only three things that are actually turned on for this tenant. So we will actually jump back over here, back into our Office 365, and we want to go ahead and take some of the data that we've verified as part of the platform and submit that as a query. And so we'll go ahead and click this. What it's going to do is present us with the information that we've provided to the system. We're going to see that I see both my verified and not verified data. Obviously, I do not live at 1 Microsoft Way Redmond. Therefore, it is not verified and it's not able to be selected. I'm going to go ahead and say that I want to submit my chris@Soliance.net email, and this is actually the Soliance tenant. So we'll go ahead and say that. People are able to automate a lot of things, including myself, so CAPTCHA is utilized all over the site. I've seen just about every CAPTCHA you could imagine in Google. What's going to happen, we're going to go ahead and submit this query. It's going to create a query request. The query request is specific to the tenant. You can submit a request once per year per GDPR legislation for free. That request can be targeted at the tenant itself. It could also be simply targeted at an application. In this case, in the backend platform, any application can have the ability to have both pre-approval and post-approval. Office 365 is definitely one of those things that you want to have approval turned on for. It doesn't have to be. You can automate certain parts of it, as we will see. In this case, the data subject is able to see that this request is in pending approval status. In terms of legislation, we have about 45 days to actually respond to this request and let them know that yes, we've calculated it and we've given them back an export. Now that they've submitted this request, we need to go over to the admin side, and we're going to go and look at the tasks that have been submitted to this particular tenant. I'm logged in as the tenant admin for the one that's managing that request. We're going to see we have something sitting here that needs to be approved. That brings us over here. We are able to see the request. We're able to see the data that they've submitted to us. And so this is chris@Soliance.net is the only piece of data they submitted. The data itself is not living with the request. Similar to the way Azure Cosmos DB works is you can have what are called resource tokens for a request. The resource token is a pointer back to the resources that a data subject has approved for a particular request. The data subject can revoke or delete those tokens at any time. So it's not necessarily the case that a request will successfully process itself. The tokens do expire. The user can delete it right now if they wanted to, and the request would have no data to execute upon. But the whole idea is to make sure that you have to request the data with a token rather than just passively sending off data to some entity. So in this case, we're in a pending approval. It's got an email. This looks fine. I'm going to go ahead and approve it. The platform itself is highly scalable. It's using event hubs with Azure functions. Very cost effective, very fast. What we're going to see now is that this message is approved. On the client side, if we jump back over, do a little refresh here, we're going to see that it would have went into an approved status, but because everything's so quick, it now has moved over to processing a data export in the Office 365 side. If we are to head over to our Office 365 to our security and compliance content search, we're going to see that we do in fact have what is called an auto-created email in-out. There's a reason for it being called email in-out, which we'll get to a little later. But this request has been created. We can go look at it. We can see that the email was brought in. It's a to from request. The search is completed. We got a whole lot of data sitting in here, 15 gigabytes of information. The request itself, the search is completed. If we come over to the export, we'll see that we have an export that's sitting here that is scheduling itself to run right now. We also see that it's going to be exported somewhere, and we have a key for that particular export. At some point, the request will actually be completed, and so the data subject will refresh, and they're going to see it has in fact been completed. If we go over to our messages, we'll see that they will receive an email that says their data export has processed, but you'll also have in the platform the ability to review these messages as well as messages from the applications, the application owner, such as maybe a data breach or some other, like we've updated our privacy policy, those type of things. Subject messages are things kind of caused from request actions. So in this case, we have an export. If we go over there, we would see the export. We would see the password to that export. The user would then be able to come over to their exports, and they're going to see they have the download link. That download link actually points to the resource that has that export from it. This will not open in Chrome. We have to actually go over to IE, fire that up, and then that we put in the password, and we're able to get to the download. Now that all that's been covered, we've automated the entire process from the data subject to Office 365, but there are some very interesting things that we have to cover in terms of how Office 365 handles or how we can configure the request to come through. So we'll jump over back to the admin side. We'll go look at our applications, and we'll look at this production Office 365 app, and we're going to see that it has a bunch of different properties to it. In this case, we have some Office 365 properties. These are specific from the application stub itself. So when the stub gets installed, it will tell the platform what kind of property bag it has and what it should support, and those dynamically are going to show up here. In this particular case, we have quite a few different properties. We have the ability to support, we'll kind of go through these, I'll jump around a little bit. We have the ability to tell the engine on the Office 365 side what kind of content we want it to export. So we could say email, we could do list items, Teams messages, whatever it might be. When we look at this search mode, that's probably the most important out of all the settings. Is if we were to do a typical search, as most people on an average view of the world, they're going to do a free-form search. Free-form search simply means I'm typing in a bunch of keywords into the text box, and I'm letting it execute that, and whatever comes back I'm then filtering to send to someone. That is probably the worst way of doing it that you could imagine, and I would not recommend that whatsoever. There's only one that really is fully automatable on Office 365 side, and that's what is called, for the platform, email to from. So what that's going to do is, as you just saw, it'll take the emails that were generated and it will go and add them such that if it's from a person or to a person, then that's valid. It was sent from them or sent to them. They're probably able to see it. That's very 100%. Like, they should see that. That is the most automatable way, an operationalizing way to do the request in Office 365. If you wanted to get a little more specific, then we could start to look at things like compliance labels. If I go and I set compliance labels, and then I say I have a bunch of lists, we don't want documents. You could have a spreadsheet that has a whole bunch of people's information in it, and doing an email search would be a very bad thing because they would end up getting that particular document. So you don't really want to do that. But if you set up compliance labels and you had specific ones in there, you could add in a whole series of them delineated by a pipe that would then point at list items, and then you could say compliance as its mode, and it will go find those items, find where that email exists in those list items with those compliance labels, and that would be the information that would be returned. Similarly, from the standpoint of actually configuring apps in general, here's where we would actually override and say whether we would allow certain pieces of information from a data subject to pass through to Office 365. So in this case, the only thing that you're going to see, even though I may have submitted a whole bunch of pieces of information, the only thing it's actually going to care about are emails. The other things we could do, I could support MFA. So if you look at this particular interface, this is not, the APIs that are part of this are not documented. They're not in the graph. In order to get to this, you must be a user. The only drawback of automating GDPR requests, you must be a user as it stands right now. And so what we want to do there is we have to create a username password that will log in, as well as it should be MFA enabled, because that compliance is a very powerful level of being allowed to create those searches and do the exports and be able to view that, because you are literally given the keys to the kingdom here. So MFA is a good thing. All applications across the platform, if they support MFA, it can be set in the application stub to allow that. It will do the MFA negotiation, get the code, do its thing, all automated. So we support that. If it is a OAuth app, we do that. We can support that as well. We have a thing. There's the ability of what's called OAuth fallback. If it's in the graph like Azure AD, we'll make the calls through Azure AD in the graph and be able to do the exports of that particular data, and we'll have a video on that soon. But you can create your own OAuth client IDs and secrets, so you can put those in there. You can do the test authorization. It'll send you over there such that you'll test if you have a right access token. I'll send you over there so you could do the admin authorize, so that the consent is set up properly, so that the application has everything it needs to make the request to do the exports. So we support that. If you don't create a client ID secret on your own, what OAuth fallback does is it allows you to come to the platform's client ID and secrets. So those applications are all set up with the proper permissions to make the calls that they need to do in order to pull the data out. So that's in there. It's a very cool feature of the platform. One of the other things I'll point out here is that Office 365 is actually a very expensive application to do GDPR in, and the biggest reason is the whole pre-process post-approval. So right now the only thing I have in here is pre-approval enabled for this. I don't have the post-approval. But when we look at the concept of sending a request from a data subject, they'll send some information. We do not want it to be for free form, their first name and last name. It's a very bad idea. You'll never do it. Don't ever think about doing it. If a name is sent in, it's Chris, it's just going to generically find every word Chris across the entire tenant, and it's going to return that in the result set. That's very bad. So we will not do that. So one of the things, again, the only one that really makes any sense is email to from. But you may want to actually review it. So the time it takes to do the approval, let it go through, pull down the download, which could be multiple gigabytes, review all of the data that's inside that export before you decide, yeah, I approve this, and then send it on, probably going to take you about a day just to review a single request. So you have to go and kind of calculate how much is it going to cost for a person to do a single GDPR request against an Office 365 tenant. And what you're going to find is it's very expensive. It's going to be over $250 by far, but that's about where I kind of calculated if you had an admin doing it. But the fortunate thing is you're probably not going to hire an admin because this person will have the keys to the kingdom for your entire Office 365 tenant. So it's probably going to be someone you trust. They're probably going to get paid very well, and you're probably going to have a team, unfortunately. So the cost for doing something like that is probably going to be a lot more than $250. Now what this means is that if someone was to send a second request within the period of 1 year, they're going to have to pay $250, so you recoup the cost of actually processing that request. And so we automate that through the platform. When they go to submit the request, we'll see if they've already submitted one, and then we'll actually handle the processing of that, taking a small fee to then pass you on that revenue such that you can recoup those costs or even allocate it back to the platform for other features such as breach notices and messaging and those types of things. So that is the process of actually walking through and doing Office 365 requests from a data subject standpoint to a back-end admin. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be doing a lot more around Dynamics and Yammer and a few other ones, so stay tuned.